Welcome to week number 7 of the Hearthstone Collegiate National Championships. It is the second day of our final week of this Swiss bracket. My name's Cora Georgiou, and I'm joined on the desk by Nathan, that's Admirable Zamora. It has been quite a wild ride to get to this point, but now it is crunch time, Nathan.
Last day of the regular season. 2 more decider matches coming up today. All season long, we've been talking about how each match is more and more important. Today, it's do or die. If you don't make it today, got to wait till next season.
And just in case you haven't been following along, let's take a look at exactly how this tournament format has been working. So teams have been split into one of 4 regional Swiss groups, and they've been playing 1 match per week over the course of 7 weeks. Teams with 5 or more wins advance to a Swiss playoff. Top 16 teams from the playoffs then will advance to a championship bracket, and this is all going to culminate in the top 2 teams from each region advancing to the live national championships. That is what these guys are all fighting for.
Yep, and even though they'll be working in teams and collaborating with each other, it is conquest, as it's always been. Each week, they'll submit 4 unique classes. Once they see what their opponents have brought to the table, they'll choose one of their own classes, and it will be omit from the series. It is a self-ban. From there, they'll play a best-of-5 match where the first team to win a game with each of their decks takes the set.
Conquest that we know and love by now, and brings in the self-ban, which gives it a little bit something extra. And then the team format gives players an option to collaborate with each other because 2 heads is better than 1, so 3 heads, it's got to be great.
Unless you're an ogre brute, in which case then you would attack the wrong target 66% of the time.
Yeah, that would be bad. That would be bad then. Fortunately, these are humans and college students playing some Hearthstone. Let's take a look at what we have in store for today. Our final broadcast day of this Swiss bracket. We're going to the East and North regions. It's going to be George Wash up against Penn State to kick off the day. Colorado State up against Miami, Ohio. And then Robert Morris taking on Waterloo. Our first and third matches of the day are going to be decider matches. So we've got a nice little decider sandwich.
Yeah, 4-2 records for the teams on top and bottom. And in the middle, we got a 6-0 battle going on. So one of the teams will be undefeated after the season's over.
A lot on the line for these guys. Let's take a look at the East region. Our first match, of course, Pennsylvania State University taking on George Washington University. Penn State is 42nd ranked in the East region. They have a 4-2 match score and a 16-10 game score. George Washington University is 66th. 4-2 match score, 13-8 game score. Game score doesn't matter. Match score is all that we are looking at here. The team to get their 5th win will be moving on to the regional playoffs.
Yeah, the game score is really more of a descriptive stat at this point than anything else. And to kind of give you a scope of how large this is, I mean, look at how deep down the standings 4-2 teams were going. There is a ton of schools competing in this and a ton of teams. George Washington University, though, they only had 2 teams competing in this event. Pennsylvania State University, they had 9 teams in this. So this would be a big win for George Washington. Make sure that you get a school into that top playoff bracket.
It absolutely would be. And we have some other fantastic matches going on today. But, of course, we're going to be giving away some sweet card backs as well. So make sure you tweet at Team Tespa. Go on Facebook /Team Tespa. Ask us your questions. And if your tweet is chosen to be featured on the stream, then you do receive the Dollar on Flame card back. Our gift to you just for being a part of this crazy Tespa ride.
Woo! Free.
Pretty sweet.
Love
Let's take a look at our first match of the day. It is George Washington University up against Pennsylvania State University.
Yeah, and the trend continues of seeing more Druid and more Priest. We often see those classes self-banned when they're just not in the right spots for the lineup. But as the format has slowed down due to the small-time Buccaneer change, those decks have been creeping in, and they've been looking pretty darn strong.
Yeah, the Druid and the Priest have been making great impressions on myself, at least. The Jade Shaman has been a bit of a weak link, so we'll have to take a look, keep an eye on how that does today. Let's get a closer look at George Washington University. Boars abound. It is going to be Waftel, Mr. E, and ILH.
Yeah, why is it all boars?
I couldn't tell you.
Maybe they're just boring.
I don't see a mascot that...
Come on.
That would result in the pig. Yes, I heard it. But I was already on another train of thought, so I didn't acknowledge it.
I get you.
Plus, I made that joke in rehearsal, so.
Ooh.
Well.
I want to see the rest of the hat.
That's a nice hat. You yourself just bought a hat for HCT.
Wish I had a hat like that.
Hat connoisseur now.
I do great things.
And then Pennsylvania State University is their opponent. It's Immortal, Frostbitten, and Magic Maginin. We have seen these guys on stream before. They did well before. So this time, this is where it really matters.
I'm glad you read the names too. I definitely would have read that as Magic Magician, which is a bit redundant.
Well, I think it's apt. Magicians are magic. So,
What was
you
the
know,
poster in the background? Was that like a camera he had set up? What was that? They had like another screen or something. It looked like.
I
I'm
didn't
curious.
see for sure. We'll be getting glimpses of their Skype cams all throughout this match, so I'll have to keep a better eye on it for next time. But it's a lone wolf at George Washington University up against a 2 team at Pennsylvania State. A lot of these schools are on spring break right now, so even though it is teams of 3 competing, and these teams of 3 have been playing together for the last several weeks, it's been a little bit light on team attendance this week. So here we can see the team bands. George Washington University has banned away their Shaman, and Pennsylvania State has banned away their Warrior. The Warrior ban has actually been pretty common since the balance changes.
It really has. And something that I'm also interested in is the Shaman ban. I mean, we've been seeing it really struggle on the broadcast for teams to close. I think it was in our 3rd match yesterday. Shaman went 1-5, and its win that it picked up was versus Shaman.
Yeah, where one of them actually had to win. You could not possibly draw that game. So
it's just been struggling. I'm curious what's going on with that build, because Shaman was thought to be one of the strongest classes out there. Now, Spirit Claws did get changed to 2 mana, and Buccaneer was a big facet of that deck, and having an extremely consistent turn 1 play, where that's now at 1 health, not as resilient, not found as often. As a result, less consistent. So they moved over to the Jade builds, and the Jade builds just haven't been pulling weight, it seems like.
Even losing the Pirates, though, you still retain Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem, so the Shaman has that early game. I don't know, maybe just some tech choices. It hasn't seemed like it's been fitting very well into this tournament meta. But up first, it is going to be the Pirate Warrior up against the Reno Warlock.
Look, that's a 3rd teammate on that screen.
Oh, he's being Skyped in. Oh, now that's great.
Oh, that's smart.
Penn State wants all 3 brains firing on all cylinders.
I like it. So Pirate Warrior versus Reno Warlock. Now, this matchup certainly got a little bit harder for Pirate Warrior since they lost that extremely strong small-time Buccaneer on their 1. This is one of the matchups where I think it stayed about the same power level, though. You know, outside of Mortal Coil, not really too many ways it gets killed other than combat with a minion, which is usually bigger than it anyway, or in an AoE spell, which all of them would have killed it. So the fact that they have Argent Horse Rider in its stead means that the deck is still very strong, but not quite as strong. And Patches drawn on turn 1 is horrible for George Washington, as their game plan is mainly just to try to kill Penn State as quickly as possible, and all Penn State's trying to do is disrupt the early game. That Patches draw likely means Penn State has got a massive advantage due to their hand.
Yeah, it's not what George Washington wanted to see under any circumstances, but I absolutely agree with you. The loss of small-time Buccaneer hurts, but now you've been seeing builds with Bash, builds with Naga Corsair, builds with South Sea Captain. It's started to take a little bit more of a board-centric approach and less of the, I'm going to deal 9 damage with my 1-drop, and then we're just going to Mortal Strike burn you out.
Yeah.
It's taken a little bit more of a board approach.
Which it's always kind of had that option. The difference is how it does it now with Argent Horse Rider instead of Small-Time Buccaneer. That slows it a lot, and it does kill some of its massive early game potential. The deck, one of the reasons it's always been so good, though, is its ability to flex that way and kind of play both roles. The fact that it can play both roles usually means that there's options in the early game, and that's what aggro decks thrive on, is early game options. Ooh, second South Sea Deckhand. I mean, this is some real damage that George Washington has cranking out soon.
Yeah, they're picking up some gas, but Penn State does have the Mistress of Mixtures on board, so George Wash is going to have to go through that before they start hitting face, or all the damage will just be negated.
Yeah, likely to be a weapon and then Azaz first mate in this spot. But Penn State's hand is just so good for this exact situation. The Ooze, I think, is probably going to come down, even though it's low value. The point is just to be a disruptive effect. The fact that they have second-rate Bruiser and they have Refreshment Vendor means that they're getting through this early game what looks like pretty comfortably, and then Shadow Bolt for a Bloodsail Cultist or a Frothing Berserker or even a Korkron Elite. They have the tools to take care of this.
Yeah, and just because you're not using Acidic Swamp Ooze on an Arcanite Reaper doesn't mean it's still not a very valuable card. If you're removing this Rusty Hook, well then maybe your opponent's hand is upgrade Bloodsail Cultist. Now they don't have a base weapon to use that on. You're disrupting their turns even more.
Yeah, here it might not be used just simply because of the 2/1s, but there's still a good chance I think it gets used in this spot. I don't know though. I mean, maybe they want to see a third minion, They get the second-rate bruiser down. How long is the coin for the right spot? This is an interesting spot here. I think with George Washington 100% having patches in hand, that the ooze just makes a lot more sense here. It means that third card isn't gas. That this is a big shutdown. You know, even if it didn't kill the weapon, it would just be fine.
Yeah, it does mean that the second-rate bruiser will be delayed, but Penn State's curve is looking reasonable without it, or even just keeping it at 5 mana.
I think I'd tend to play the ooze here. I mean, life total is so important, and their cards are so valuable as they step through the rest of the game. If they get any semblance of board control, that is bad news for George Washington.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder for the Pirate Warrior to burn down their opponents from hand. You're seeing a lot of builds that aren't running Mortal Strike or maybe only have 1 copy. So if you can gain board presence, put up a taunt, it's difficult for the Pirate Warrior to close out the game in a lot of cases. I think we actually had one match yesterday where the Pirate Warrior had to rely completely on steady shot off of Finley to actually close out a game against Shaman.
You know, if you'd have told me when I was a kid that one day I'd be saying Acidic Swamp Ooze is bad news for George Washington, I wouldn't have believed you.
Father of our nation.
Shadow Bolt's
defeated by an Acidic Swamp Ooze.
Shadow Bolt's also pretty bad news, and now the hand is looking really sketch.
Yeah, George Wash is
22, going to 20, going to 19. Yeah, this is the last hurrah here.
They're in a bad spot. An Arcanite Reaper off the top would be fantastic. Would put them right back into this game, but they got to draw into something really fast.
And here, Penn State needs to evaluate their life total. Do they need to just throw the taunt away now and try to absorb damage, or do you try to get a threat on board, start chipping away at the board, and then get a taunt down when it's not directly contested? The more time you give to George Washington to draw a weapon, the more likely it is that the taunt is just straight bypassed. But in this situation, I think they can afford it. I would like to see the refreshment vendor on this turn, I think.
Okay.
Maybe even the Twilight Drake. Being able to 100% contest a strong 4-health minion, I think would be great for them right now.
I agree.
Yeah, they would have gotten punished if they played the second-rate bruiser here.
There are many great 4-health minions in the Pirate Warrior deck. A lot that have 3 health as well, so I can see where the refreshment vendor would be effective.
This thing's pulling a lot of weight. I don't like this play from George Washington because they're simply out of resources. They need their minions to pull a lot of value, but this is 8 damage this turn and then 8 damage on the following turn. So they're relying on that trade to buy them way more long-term damage, and I'm not sure that's going to be the case. I'm not ready.
I mean, the second that Penn State picks up Reno Jackson, this game's just, it's all over.
It certainly is like the big talking point.
There's that Arcanite Reaper.
The trade did benefit them heavily in the face of a taunt, though, so there is that one aspect. I think I still would like to just see them simply push, but this worked out a lot better.
Well, one Arcanite Reaper makes this game look a lot different.
It certainly does. And I think it's very likely to see a power overwhelming this turn just to take care of the Dread Course. They have to peel damage off the board right away. They do not have the liberty of waiting. Yeah, that's the one benefit aggro decks really have, too, is if you're able to keep your opponent in a tough spot, they have to use their resources relatively inefficiently.
It really is kind of incredible how inefficiently mid-range and control decks are forced to trade into small taunts. Stoneclaw Totem, the Feral Spirits totems or tokens in Shaman, just the single, 2 copies of Dread Corsair in Pirate Warrior. It's very difficult for them to get through cleanly. We keep running into this problem where these decks are throwing away damage just because they don't have any better way to clear off these priority taunts.
Yeah, and the longer this game goes in this style of direction, the better it is for George Washington. Every single time their minions get to attack, and then their minions get attacked into, it buys them time. I mean, I think they're considering investing more into the board state here, but I don't know if it's here.
Well, with the bash drawn over 2 turns.
Look at it, 1 damage off lethal in 2 turns.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know it's in Penn State's hand, but it's hard to play around just 1-ofs.
Yeah, bash is usually a 1-of copy. If there's bash in the build, does that automatically mean there's no Mortal Strike?
Not automatically, but I would definitely assume it means that there isn't a Mortal Strike.
Then this is pretty much the limits of the reach for George Wash.
Yeah, so at this point, it's charges and weapons. Heroic Strike. Bash now is really interesting. Well, now they've told Penn State that they have Mortal Strike or Bash.
I mean, if your opponent has Reno anyway,
exactly.
you lose.
If they see Reno, it's over. So I don't think it makes much difference if they Bash now or not. That's pretty good. That's really good.
Well, it keeps 2 taunts alive on their board. Would Siphon Soul into the Horse Rider be better? No, because you want that Arcanite Reaper going into a minion.
Yeah, it's the fact they can manipulate the board so heavily here. Well, that's good. Wow, that's really good. So now any single point of damage will get through the taunt unless it's Heroic Strike. So any non-weapon damage they can apply is threatening lethal in this spot. So Penn State. Oh my.
You can Siphon Soul your Defender of Argus.
This is dangerous. I think I'd like to see a life tap.
Scary.
I mean, Reno is a very necessary draw right now.
George Wash picks up Korkron. I think they've had both South Sea deckhands.
Argent
Leroy,
Horse Rider,
Horse
Leroy.
Rider.
I mean, unless you siphon your own guy, which means your clock is cut to nothing.
Yeah.
I think they just got to go for it. I'm okay with just Emperor, too. I mean, you know, risk it for the biscuit. If your opponent doesn't have damage, you get 2 draws in the following turn as well. So there's merit to every single one of these plays except for Mortal Coil your own.
Your own imp. Yes, that is wrong. Unless you just so happen to draw into Reno. Then it's wrong, but you're lucky.
Tough call. Where do the percentages fit best? It's hard to calculate that in 70 seconds.
I think this is fine. I think, like you said, if you siphon your own Argus, you are making it impossible to kill them. Ooh.
I wouldn't set that Arcanite Reaper. There's
Although,
nothing in the deck that costs more than 5, so
Yeah.
setting this just tells Penn State exactly what they need to play around.
yeah, even Leroy's only 5 mana, and that's top of your curve.
They got to figure out a way to push the damage, too. This is close.
And George Wash still at 24 before the attacks from Penn State
they're,
this turn.
They're 3 turns off of dying still.
And all they have to find is 1 damage, they think.
Well, 7, 10, 12, 16. Yeah, they can only present 16 damage on the following turn. So even if they just played all of their minions, they're still away from lethal. I think again, they got to risk it. And this was the power that Dread Corsair provided. Simply forcing that power overwhelming meant that it's going to take Penn State likely 2 more turns instead of 1.
I think that would have changed this turn.
Big deal.
If you still had access to the last 4 damage, maybe you can risk your opponent on 1 more draw, but here I don't think you have the liberty.
I don't think they have liberty to do anything else.
If you pick up Sun Fury Protector or Reno.
Yikes.
That's kind of it.
Oh, they're going to Siphon Soul their own minions. So this does play around Argent Horse Rider, and it plays around Upgrade for a turn. It does not play around Korkron. It does play around any of the other damage. Oh,
There's
my.
Upgrade.
But now, it's back in the same situation. They will have 2 draws in this spot, though. They can life tap. And if they don't pick up anything useful, they will certainly life tap for Reno. Life tap for Reno.
Oh.
Reno Jackson gets drawn. And look at Penn State. 14-1 to draw Reno Jackson. What other outs could they have had, though? Big taunts.
Sun Fury Protector. They used Argus. They used Siphon Soul. They used Earthen Ring. They used Refreshment Vendor.
Could have been Shambler.
Yep, Shambler could have done it.
Wow. George Washington going to drop game number 1. So close.
There's the extra damage they needed last turn. 1 turn too late. That was just about as close as it gets.
That was nuts.
We've seen a lot of that, though. Not yesterday. We didn't see
He's never late.
any of that back and forth yesterday.
He's never late.
But,
He's always there exactly when he means.
Speak for yourself. He's been very late for me before. But in this case, right on time. And you know what? Penn State played it very carefully the last couple of turns. If they had tapped the previous turn, they would have hit Twisting Nether, and they would have died. So Siphon Soul was correct. It just, I don't know. In hindsight, it was right. At the time, it seemed like maybe they were playing a little bit defensively. It worked out.
They measured all their odds. The fact that they had no more healing to draw meant that they needed to just try to extend and get that 2 draws in the following turn. Get the information. You know, maybe George Washington doesn't draw that Arcanite Reaver.
Also makes you wonder if George Washington could have done just a single extra point of damage to Penn State over the course of that game. They wouldn't have been able to life tap.
They definitely had a lot of trades in there, but I think the trades ended up buying them quite a bit of damage. It's really hard to say, but that is one you could definitely go look at and review and see a lot of different ways to play it.
A lot of lines, admirable.
Aggro thrives on those micro decisions. You have to know how it pans out in the end game. It usually requires experience, but oftentimes you can just slow down and think about it. But at that limited amount of time is what prohibits players from making perfect decisions every single time.
And it's so often thought of as a thoughtless archetype. Aggro is something that you can just play minions, play weapons, hit face. It's really not. There is a lot of patient planning and a lot of prediction behind those turns that, you know, maybe if you'd done just one small thing differently, you could have won a game.
Yeah, I mean,
it's very tough.
The nature of the aggressive decks in Hearthstone has been that, well, they even have 2 Mortal Strikes in the deck too. The nature of the aggressive decks has been that they've just been so strong that they're forgiving. And when decks are very forgiving on decision-making at times because of their power level, it certainly feels like there's no decisions to be made. But when you watch the best players handle the decks, you see a major difference in how the early games pan out. And that's the difference between, you know, that 55 to 60% and then the 50%.
And I think that's very relevant since the balance changes, especially for Pirate Warrior. With Small Time Buccaneer, you could kind of autopilot and win the game 60% of the time.
It was just too forgiving, even if you misplayed.
It was just too strong.
Yeah.
But now that you don't have Small Time Buccaneer, you need to be a little bit smarter with your resources. Minions matter.
Yeah, minions are definitely going to matter in this one. This is a pretty good opening hand for Penn State. They have Totem Golem and they have Spirit Claws to fight for the early game.
Jade Claws.
Again, I'm sorry, yeah, Jade Claws. Their whole goal in this matchup is just to offset what George Washington is doing at every step of the way. And one of the ways they do that is just by making strong tempo plays and keeping the board state weird for George Washington. Their plan is pretty much exactly the same as the previous matchup, though, where their main goal is to get across a lot of damage and then use Heroic Strike, Mortal Strike, Leroy, whatever kind of damage from hand it is, to close it out before Penn State can stabilize.
And now that we know that George Wash has 2 copies of Mortal Strike, there's a lot of reach in the middle.
And a Bash.
Yeah, that's an extra burn spell. You usually don't see that.
It's heavily teched for control-style matchups where they want that extra reach. And I imagine this axe is destined for Totem Golem at this point. Patches is some good.
Making trades clean on Totem Golem since this year.
Yeah, this was kind of the dream opening for George Washington, too, was having the Fiery War Axe, not drawing the patches, which is the intended purpose, and then landing the Bloodsail Raider. Now, that's a big payoff card when you have an early weapon. Penn State looking like they're going to go into the Totem Golem here, and Heroic Strike is going to make quick work of this.
You know what? There's the 1 damage from last game. George Wash drew patches.
Ah, yeah.
That could have very
took up a card slot
very
too.
Clearly changed that last game.
Yeah, easy turn here for George Washington on the Heroic Strike. Once that Raider connects, you know it's connecting again. Turn 4 for Penn State is overloaded for 1. So no Jade Lightning, no Jinyu Water Speaker. Feral Spirits is the only thing that gets past that, and they already have a Fiery War Axe in hand.
If there was a Lightning Bolt in Penn State's hand, you would have likely seen that come down this turn.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to just sacrifice your Totem Golem to the Bloodsail Raider. It's not how you want to play this matchup. All right, so this is a heavy Jade build.
Yes, and this is why I think the Jade builds have been struggling, is they just have a lot of cards that require you to slowly step up the curve. And they can fight for the early game, but in the face of backup for the early aggression, it struggles. And that's, again, something that aggro decks are very good at, is using 1 or 2 key cards, keeping a minion online forever.
Yeah, I've really seen 2 different styles of this mid-range Jade Shaman. You have the full Jade, which I think we're seeing right here, which tops out usually around Jade Chieftain. And then there is a lower Jade count build that can run Thunderbluff Valiant, 2 copies of Feral Spirit, and tops out at Thing from Below. So a little bit lower curved, still has a little bit more aggression in the early game, doesn't have the staying power of the Jades in the late, but uses the early Jades to just get through and try to push damage earlier. Doesn't run Devolve, and that build seems overall a little bit stronger to me right now. I think that we're seeing maybe the lesser build here.
Well, it's a heavy hand for George Washington. I imagine that the Fiery Bat's gonna have to bite the dust here. They don't have another minion to add to the board, and given how they played last game, they are certainly keen on protecting their minions.
Well,
they might just push though. I mean, this is
if you
7
War
this
Axe
turn.
Heroic Strike, yeah, 7, 5 with the minion, then you go into Arcanite Reaper.
They have 21 damage over 2 turns with full face. So Fiery War Axe Heroic Strike is 7, 5 more from the Raider, that's 12. Then they have 3 more from the Fiery War Axe. The next turn it's 15, and then 6 from Leroy. So I think you play protection again on this turn, and try to set it up afterwards. I'm not really sure there's a card they can draw other than... Yeah, there's not a card in their deck they can draw to actually deliver lethal in the next 2 turns.
Yeah. Their mana is just too taken up. Well, you just saw first Maelstrom Portal. Second Maelstrom Portal is the only thing that would easily take out this Raider, so maybe it punches for another 10.
I mean, this gets through for 5 more damage. That's trouble for Penn State. They have to Hex, I think. There's just no way. I mean, Jinyu would be... You play Jinyu, it's just countered by the board already. I think it's Hex and Jade Claws.
Then you can go with Jinyu in the following turn.
Maybe
because
a
you're
totem.
overloaded to 5.
Maybe totems. It will be important for them to hit taunts, but you know they're at 17 and they have Jinyu Water Speaker, so they will scale into taunts at some point in this game.
Would you rather have a totem or a weapon that you can't really trade with because you're going to die and a 1/1 Jade on board? I mean, you can use the weapon to clear off the frog from Hex.
I mean, they might have to attack another minion at some point. You know, like a Celsi deck game or something. That's fine with that.
It's forgiving enough.
Ah, the old 2-drop getting hexed after it's dealt 10 points of damage. Is that a Mortal Strike? Oh, my.
That is heaps and heaps of damage.
At this point, I'd like to see George Washington just continue to slow it down. Like, just get the value out of their cards in hand. I don't... You know, they have so much damage in weapons that I could totally see overriding the Fiery War Axe here and just putting Penn State to the test. But if they see Taunt Totem this turn, that's going to be upsetting. And the overload means that there's no Jade Chieftain for the following turn, so George Washington, they have to push the issue right now.
Frothing Berserker just a few turns too late for George Wash. Now they're looking for how they can close this game out in 2 turns.
And this is what I was looking at. You know, if they use a Heroic Strike last turn and just waited, they wouldn't be in a situation, I think, where they have to take a risk like this. In this situation, I'm looking at Heroic Strike, Mortal Strike, or maybe just even Leroy.
You wish you could Leroy Heroic Strike in the same turn.
Oh, yeah. And that's what I look at. You know, they would have loved to unlock this damage as well, but I think that their longevity was pretty solid if they just took it slow. I like the way they played it, though. I mean, I like it both ways. That's what makes it so tough to me. Is
both are viable lines. They're both very valid.
One test right away. The other one says, I think my draws are good enough.
George Wash just going to need to get this Leroy and Heroic Strike through.
My.
Penn State gets a taunt. Throw a wrench in their plans.
You know, something I didn't consider here was Bloodlust. I don't think. Bloodlust would have killed them.
That's a great point. Yeah, 5, 6, 7, 8. On board 10, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Yeah, they would have been dead.
No taunt totem. George Washington's fist pumping, but there's a Hex in hand to protect for another turn. They need to Hex their own minion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird play, but...
2 whelps into the Leroy, Hex your other 1/1 totem or the golem. You want to keep the totem alive because you want to roll Stone Claw on the following turn. So you Hex the golem.
Yeah, not really much else. And they would definitely want to clear out the board space. In this spot, they're going to need the space on board for the Jade Chieftain. They're deliberating just how they want to trade it. But that's a nod to Bloodlust, though. Like, if they're doing that, I think that means Bloodlust is in the deck.
In which case, that's the better trade for them. Looks weird.
Wowza. They're still off, though.
Just 2 points off lethal with the first mate draw.
My blade be thirsty.
They're not dead to Flame Tongue, Jade Lightning. Still looking good for George Washington. They're awfully close.
But there's a 2/2 golem taunt coming for Penn State this turn from the Jade Chieftain. And another one they can follow it up with on the following turn.
That's right.
Warriors, come out to play.
So George Wash can pick up Southsea Deckhand. That would give them lethal this turn.
Argent Horse Rider, I think, is 1 mana off of doing it. Upgrade. Nope, it wouldn't work because they need the Heroic Strike.
Yep.
Can't attack twice. Unless you have
Deckhand,
Doomhammer.
if they're running the Murloc package, that would be Bluegill, but I think we would have seen one of those by now. I think Deckhand's it.
Oh, you know, Mortal Strike, Bash.
Yeah. To bypass the taunt.
Yep.
But the only way to get past the taunt and hit face for lethal
Horse
with a
Rider
Heroic
is
Strike.
Horse Rider once again will test Penn State.
Mhm.
Still a lot of good draws. Corcoran Elite, test them. Almost everything in the deck puts
It's pretty
Penn
good.
State to the test or wins the game for George Washington. That is not
I'll
one of them.
accept that.
Wow.
The Raider was really great for George Wash earlier in this game, but
And you got to look at this spot and wonder if they had kept that Fiery War Axe around and taken it slow, would they have had the weapon charges to push through this?
they would have had 2 more weapon charges, so it's possible. Looks like George Wash is going to be on the burn plan.
I mean, it's got to be burn at this point, I think.
Bash and Mortal Strike, so that's 2.
Heroic Strike won't work.
Penn State's not going to put him below 12.
No charge damage is really working here. Yeah, they're not going below 12. Oh, wait a minute. So if they attack with the 3/3, it drops them to 14. They would be 1 damage off to Drew Corcoran in that instance. Because then the Corcoran would go into the 3/3. They would put their weapon into anything to go to 12. They're 1 damage off lethal with a Mortal Strike.
Yep.
12 or less, Mortal Strike 6 damage. So something's missing.
6 does not equal 7. Not this time.
It's a burn spell and a burn spell only, I think.
It's 2 draws in the deck.
Finley can be a
Ooh.
burn spell, and it's smart to not armor up first here. They have a lot of ways to win.
There's Life Tap, but that would give them 6 mana. They wouldn't have the mana.
right.
They would need 1 more mana for Bash to be an out. They would need 2 for it to be Mortal Strike. I don't think there's any way they can win.
If it was Steady Shot, they had the game. If it was,
Yes, it
if
was.
it was the Fire Blast, that's game. because they can run their weapon into the 3/3.
What did Penn State set them at on the previous turn?
15.
15? Yep.
I think it's 15 or 14. They could run the weapon in and deal the damage. That much I'm positive of. Yeah,
Yep,
14.
they're at 14. They could hit their weapon into the taunt. That would put them below 12. Mortal Strike would be active.
This game is nuts. George Washington so close both times. 2-0 for Penn State. 1 game away from securing their playoff spot.
Close only matters in horseshoes, and this is Hearthstone, unfortunately.
I love the Skype camera doing the clap. It's just
So inclusive. That's great. Making sure
perfect.
everybody's there. I like it.
technology. It's beautiful.
Feels like you have a teammate and a fan at the same time. Well, Penn State up 2-0. They are on match point already. And before we get into game number 3, we have our first tweet of the day. So let's see what we have in store. This one coming to us from PVZ 2013. How much dust have you saved for the next expansion?
0.
0.
Every time I get 3,200 dust, I craft a golden legendary. So
Oh, you're an addict.
Yeah.
You have a lot of
65
gold
golden legendaries, I think now. And because Finja was the latest one I made, so I had to make the Murloc War Leaders as well. So that was another 3,200.
Of course. Of course.
So
I did
about 32.
I did craft the gold Finja a couple weeks back. I just crafted golden Ragnaros and golden Sylvanas.
Oh, the Hall of Fame.
I think I finally had 6,400. So I went ahead and crafted golden Ragnaros and gold Sylvanas because you get the dust refund when Ungoro comes out and the Hall of Fame goes into play. I think I still have about 1,000 dust. But then when you get the dust refunds, I'll have a fair amount after that because you get it for Power Overwhelming, Ice Lance, those cards as well.
The Hall of Fame thing's cool. So all the cards that are going to the Hall of Fame, Ice Lance, Power Overwhelming, Conceal, and then Azure Drake, Sylvanas, Ragnaros. When they move those to the Hall of Fame, you just keep your cards, but they're no longer in Standard. They're only playable in Wild. But what Blizzard decided to do is give you a full dust refund on those cards. You don't have to disenchant them. So if you really want Golden Ragnaros or Sylvanas, it's a good time to craft them because when they move, you get to keep the gold legendary and 3,200 dust.
Yep, I think they give you because for Power Overwhelming, for instance, you can play a maximum of 2 copies of that in their deck. If you have 2 copies of Golden Power Overwhelming, they'll give you the dust equivalent of that. Or if you just have 2 copies of non-gold Power Overwhelming, they'll give you the equivalent.
You can't
for that.
just have like 8 gold Ragnaros.
Yeah, and they'll give it.
They
They
get
just
all
give
the
it to you
dust
one
and then
time.
disenchant them and profit from it. You get the one. You get the biggest one.
Still a good deal though. So I went ahead and did that. Still got a little bit of dust left, but looking forward to seeing how I can spend it when the expansion comes out. So if you have any questions you want to ask us, tweet at Team Tespa. Go on Facebook /Team Tespa. And if your question is chosen to be featured on stream, then you do receive the Dalaran Flame card back. Get to bling out the rest of your collection for preparation for the next set.
For free.
For free.
It's lit. Match point.
And stayed up 2-0. They have to find a win with the Druid.
Now, Druid is weak to 2 of these. Very weak. I would say Pirate Warrior and Rogue are not quality matchups. Druid's cards just don't interact very well against them. The Pirate Warrior matchup certainly got a lot better with Buccaneer out of the mix. And Priest, it's still a bit of a toss-up. I've seen a lot of the Druid decks have 2 copies of Ancient of War.
Yeah.
That's a card that tends to be pretty bad versus Priest. They have Draconid Operative, which survives combat with it. Shadow Word Death, which turns into a huge tempo play. And it's not really working into your game plan, which is either ramp your mana and unlock super powerful turns or draw cards. Those are the 2 ways that Druid really fights against Priest. So if Penn State has 2 copies of Ancient of War and they've kind of skimped on some of the card draw, that could be a tough matchup for them.
But here we can see another card that's recently come back into the J Druid builds, the Druid of the Claw, which is great against the Priest.
Yes.
That 4 attack threshold is very difficult for the Priest to deal with.
Honestly, I think it's great against Pirate Warrior too. And when I played J Druid before, I used these over Ancient of War. And what I found myself in situations doing was just running out of taunts at some point. And it was hard to fit everything in. But with Small Time Buccaneer being gone, you have a lot more life to play with. And so because of that, I'm not necessarily sure you need Ancient of War, but that certainly can be a closing card versus Pirate Warrior.
It absolutely can. Maybe just Druid of the Claws, 1 copy of Gadget Center enough now.
Ooh, nice opening hand here for Penn State as well. They've drawn both Jade Idols, which will help ramp up their Jade cards to a reasonable state. They have Mulch for the 3-drop that comes in, and they have Wrath for a minion. And George Washington, 2 games out of 3 now, has drawn patches in the opener. That is devastating.
That quite literally was game losing for them in the first game of this series. If they had won that game, they were 1 damage off of lethal. It would have, I think the series would have looked very different.
It was such a big difference, too, because not only does patches not come out for free, but it occupies what would be a normal draw otherwise.
Yeah, well, in this case, Penn State has all the removal they can really want. It's going to come down to if they can draw the follow-up after they get rid of George Wash's early game.
For Penn State. Mulch for the 3-drop, swipe for the next, and Ancient War drawn. I think they're going to scale out of this very easily.
Yeah, there are 6 ramp cards in the deck, and 2 Jade Blossom, 2 Wild Growth, 2 Innervate. So the likelihood of cheating your mana curve after you use this removal is very high.
Yeah, honestly, the Wild Growth is tending to be a card that you can't afford to play in this matchup. I actually have been mulliganing it versus Pirate Warrior because you just don't have time to play it. You need to take care of the board position.
So you hard mulligan for the removal.
Yeah, and Innervate. And if you have those cards, Jade Idol too. But if you have those cards, what ends up happening is, like, say you Wild Growth and your opponent played Bloodsail Raider, and then they drop a 2/4 Frowling Berserker or a 3/4 Bloodsail Cultist. Suddenly that Bloodsail Raider is going to connect for 6 to 8 points of damage. Forbid they have a weapon to go with it, then you're in real bad shape. A lot of the tools that Druid normally operates with are not strong in this matchup, which is one of the reasons why it's poor. But Penn State has drawn the kind of hand that gets past this.
Yeah, and the Nourish pickup as well. We see Nourish for draw in a lot of cases. The Druid will run out of resources. They'll have to reload with a Nourish, but Nourish for ramp is fantastic as well.
Yeah, in this matchup, ramp, I think, is your sole purpose of it, especially if you draw Ancient War. Whew. Tough times for George Washington.
It's a very weak hand.
And now they have to make a decision which direction they want to take this. Thunderbluff Valiant simply a 3/6 in this matchup. Upgrade can provide them with a weapon to try to get the Bloodsail Cultist value. Is that enough value, though? Penn State's approaching their taunt turns. You might need Arcanite Reaper to get a ton of value.
Generally, you do not want to upgrade your upgrade. It's very weak.
Yeah, in aggressive matchups, it's fine, but...
Here you're looking for upgraded Fiery War Axe, upgraded Arcanite Reaper. You really need that extra damage to get through taunts and still have enough to kill your opponent.
Yeah, it's like a weird tower defense game where your early game tools are really strong, but do you need to upgrade your towers or do you need to upgrade your units? Do you just need to push damage and try to get through and keep the troops from coming? It's like a weird situation where the upgrade in an aggro matchup, totally fine to cast by itself sometimes. In this matchup, usually a bad idea.
Your priorities are very different in this matchup.
What to do?
Same cards, but you have to use them
I'd
very
love
differently.
to see the Nourish for ramp here. Nourish for ramp Jade Idol. That'll set up the swipe on the following minion.
Yep, when you Nourish for ramp, it is 2 full mana crystals. It's not empty like with Wild Growth.
Draw.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh, they pick up the Innervate anyway.
I don't know. I don't know if I like that.
It's going to work out okay, because they can Innervate into Ancient of War on 5, go into the Behemoth on 6. They're still going to curve out all right.
Oh, my.
The ramp just seems so strong.
That is a big draw for George Washington.
Rubbing their hands together.
Yeah, the not ramping here, I think, is going to really exacerbate this, too. I mean, Penn State suddenly is in a lot of trouble.
Well, George Wash still has to go through the Ancient of War the hard way.
They have upgraded an Heroic Strike. A single point of damage will get through this Ancient of War. Argent Horse Rider. Another Bloodsail Cultist. Second upgrade. This is not the hardest thing for them to push through.
South Sea Deckhand.
That'll do it. 6 damage incoming. So, I mean, it definitely bought them some needed life, but there's a limited number of taunts in this deck. Once they're gone, they're gone.
There are more now with the addition of the Druid of the Claw again.
Uh-oh. I mean, Behemoth's their last taunt? I think I like swiping Jade Idol more.
It's a close call. Do you have to play the Behemoth and just hope that you draw another taunt? You've got second Jade Behemoth. We saw Druid of the Claw in the mulligans. That's at least
Perhaps.
2.
Well, it's getting overkilled by quite a bit here.
No totems.
Does that change anything? No, it doesn't.
No. Not unless you want to have to hero power something with 3 attack to clear the board fully.
Swipe is a little bit off of being a full clear here, and this was the danger of using the Nourish for card draw. I mean, what are these extra cards doing right now? They haven't used another one of the cards they've drawn yet.
They used the Behemoth, but I think they would have drawn that anyway. So the Nourish, the Jade Spirit, the Blood Mage, no.
I think they showed a lot of disrespect to the mid-game power that George Washington's deck has in this spot. I mean, another taunt, Feral Rage, that might get them out of this, but George Washington has an Arcanite Reaper in hand.
Time waits for no one.
Well, you need to deal with the board right now or you're dead. So, I mean, maybe you kill off 2 of these minions and you hope that you draw your second Agent of War.
They're going to hero power over the Blood Mage, too.
I don't know. I think 1 card is going to be a lot more valuable than 1 health.
Well,
Unless
George Washington's
just drew
collapse.
That's a lethal.
Well, third time's the charm for George Washington. Pirate Warrior finally gets a win in this set.
That Fiery War Axe draw was what made it all happen.
Yeah. Being able to upgrade that weapon instead. Their patience paid off. They had an opportunity to play the upgrade, try to get some nominal value from it. That wouldn't have worked. The fact that they got the upgrade value, though, meant they had that one opportunity to close if they drew the right card. In that instance, Core Crown Elite, Mortal Strike. Would Bash have done it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Bash was close. But, I mean, they had 10 more damage in hand with Arcanite, but they just need time to unlock it. The big difference there, their patience paying off. And for Penn State, they needed to kind of not show patience. They needed to operate with the tools they already had. And that's why Druid suffers in that matchup. It's got to play that way, and it doesn't want to play that way. If they'd have gone into that sequence of events, though, I'm curious how differently the game works out.
I think the Druid maybe got a little bit
Greedy.
too confident. They had a very strong start. George Wash did not. They drew patches for the second time in this series. So maybe had the Druid chosen to ramp instead of draw, they would have been able to more efficiently use the resources in their hand. They didn't end up drawing a second taunt other than the Jade Behemoth, which they would have gotten regardless if they used the Nourish for draw anyway.
Well, mind you, if they ramp that turn, they get an extra minion as well.
They get the Jade Idol.
Immediately. It's a lot of stuff different in that game. A lot of stuff.
A lot of very intricate details that can change the course of a game.
I think that Nourish is a very high risk, high reward card in a lot of matchups, and in this one, I think it's ramp. I have suffered.
I think you're ramping every time against Pirate Warrior.
I've drawn. If you have the board, you can draw.
Yeah. But it's very difficult for the Druid to get the board.
Oh yeah.
Unless you're just going to win the game already.
And this is the matchup where I'm curious how Penn State's build works. They have Ancient of War in the deck, and they're actually going to keep Jade Idol in the opening hand, which sometimes can be a liability in this matchup. George Washington, they're just trying to take advantage of high health minions sitting on board. One of the key facets to this matchup is Northshire Cleric. If they can get multiple draws off that, they'll typically find those mid-sized minions to get the gas going. But 2 things that don't really help them is that in this matchup they have Draconid Operative, which the steal is usually irrelevant unless it's almost exactly swipe or mulch, and their Holy Nova style effects, or like Potion of Madness, stuff like that, it's not really big payoff cards. It's hard to get those set up.
The most value you're going to find from Holy Nova or Potion of Madness is early Jades or the Jade Spirit. There's not much that you can do with those, but Northshire Cleric into a 1/1 Jade Idol on your opponent's board on turn 1 is incredibly strong, especially when you can coin Cabal Talon Priest into Cabal Talon Priest if you so choose.
Yeah.
This is where the Priest really shines.
And it's gonna yield them a lot of card draw in this situation. Penn State, that's one of the risks to keeping Jade Idol in this particular matchup. I would typically say that you do need to keep it, but when do you need to play it?
It's a good point. It's 1 mana, so you think, well, I'm doing nothing else on turn 1, might as well. Makes my turn 3 Jade Blossom better. But until you see what your opponent can do on turn 1, I think it's a little bit too risky.
I think you can oftentimes find a spot where you have 1 extra mana, in the matchup. Now, if you don't find that spot, yeah, certainly you can get punished for it. But this is a big punish. This is a lot of card draws that Penn State is potentially losing here.
The Jade Druid will eventually win this game with large minions. Your Jade Idol is going to be effective regardless of when you play it. But if you give your opponent those extra draws, maybe they get more mid-range minions. You can't remove them. Maybe that's how they win the game. So you want to give them the least possible chance of them being able to execute their game plan.
Right. The consistency is the big issue with it. George Washington's not always going to have that curve. Now, when they do, not really much you can do about it. But when they don't, I don't know. You also
It's a very close matchup.
You have to consider how the resources are actually operating on a card-for-card basis, too. For Penn State, Mulch is a very powerful tempo tool, and tempo is something that they need to try to take away from George Washington. When they have so many extra cards, though, the tempo does mean a lot less. So one of the big factors of tempo is you hope your opponent misses. When they miss, you basically got it. They don't miss, though.
It's going to hurt. And Mulch, in a lot of cases, in this matchup, the best you're going to get from it is either Draconid Operative or something your opponent discovers off of Nether Spite Historian or off of Draconid Operative. So a lot of times you have to use your Mulch just to remove, maybe a Twilight Guardian that's been power word shielded.
Yeah.
Or maybe a Northshire Cleric that's a 1/8 that you just cannot remove, and it's like a Manatee Totem on crack. And you cannot give your opponent that value.
At that point, they've already gotten the value so many times, too. This is how they have to do it, but... Oh, boy. This is about as good as it gets if you're George Washington. I'm curious if they put on the Northshire Cleric or not.
You wish to live forever.
Yeah, at this point, if they see Swipe on their Northshire Cleric, they're pretty thrilled with that, so...
I think the stats are spread out well enough. It's very difficult for Druid to deal with several medium health minions. Their AoE is very weak. All you have option to is Swipe, or if you're playing Raven Idol, maybe you get Starfall. That's not helpful in this matchup.
I'm really curious if Penn State can ever mulch in this spot.
But what do you mulch?
The Northshire, for sure. If you're going to mulch. I mean, Azure Drake, you're almost giving it away on board right now for George Washington. It's like almost inverse value. I think that mulch here on the Northshire Cleric is honestly warranted in a lot of spots. For George Washington, they need to have a 4-drop for this turn to be super strong for them. If they have a 4-drop, you are going to suffer. But if they don't, maybe that's your opportunity. And this is what I mean by the tempo. Here, they're giving up the value. George Washington going to be able to kind of consistently string together a bunch of 5s in a row here.
If you mulch, you get to Jade Idol for a minion. Your Jade Behemoth then gives a 4/4 golem on the following turn. Maybe that's your little window of opportunity. The Guardian pickup for Washington is sick.
I think they got to pay heed to this Azure Drake, though. It's really tough to leave this around. But this is good recognition from Penn State here, too. If George Washington heals the Northshire Cleric first, it's going to be set at 1 health. Means their Twilight, or their Cabal Talon Priest is going to be at 1 health. How do they sequence this? They're either giving up the Northshire Cleric to draw a card and get rid of the Azure Drake, or they're dealing less damage, putting a lot of health, putting a lot of damage on the rest of the guy. This is a weird turn. Honestly, the Azure Drake now looks kind of brilliant. I didn't really think about the combat that much. In my head, I was just like, Northshire Cleric's a 1/5.
Well, it's a 1/4 right now. That's really important. Certainly, you do have the option of dropping the Wormrest Agent alongside a heal. Fills out your curve. Okay. Maybe your Cleric's done enough work right now.
I think they're going to sacrifice the Cabal Talon Priest instead of the Cleric.
Would
Well,
you
they gotta
rather
hurry
have a
up.
3/3 and a 3, or 3/3 and a 1/4?
Uh-oh, what
no.
happened? Well, the way the camera looks, I'm guessing that's a connection issue.
Oh, you never want to be in this situation.
Well, this game is still pretty darn even.
Even with a missed turn, yeah.
I'm curious what's going to happen here. We'll get a word from admin exactly what's going on as quickly as possible, but that definitely looks like a disconnection interrupting the game. And again, this could even be George Washington favored at this point.
In a match this important, you can't just let it go. So we'll get word. We'll let you know exactly what's going on here. If it is in fact a disconnect, and it'll have to be a regame.
This is what happens when the turn gets skipped. Is Azure Drake sticks around, and then you see a turn like this.
Well, George Wash is hovering over cards, which means they do have connection now.
I wield the power, Black.
Well, still pretty even on board.
Imagine how far they could have been ahead if they'd had
Exactly.
use of the extra 2 mana and trading into the Drake.
Would have had Worm Rest on board. Would have put more pressure down with the Cleric. Would have kept a minion alive, potentially.
Would have traded the way they wanted to trade into the Drake.
Looks like play will simply continue.
Guess so.
Ooh, that's a weak turn. Oh my.
That's a strong draw. Gadgets and Auctioneer, Innervate, Swipe.
Well, you didn't see Bookworm or Shadow Word Pain, so I actually think I like the Behemoth here. Get a little bit greedy with the Auctioneer. I mean, that's the big payoff card for Penn State. So what do they need to do in order to pull this game back? Might not need to do anything. I mean, it looks like to me like Jade Behemoth and just trade over the Twilight Guardians is a great play.
The Ragnaros in George Wash's hand. Something you don't see in every Dragon Priest deck. Maybe very useful for them in this matchup.
Yeah, it's a big point to note. Their entire lineup so far has looked like it's been teched for control-style matchups. They had a lot more burn in the Pirate deck. They have Ragnaros in the Priest deck here. I'm going to guess that their Rogue deck is straight-up Miracle that is paying less attention to the aggressive builds, which might mean that there's no questing adventurer.
I think that's a very wise meta call. You're seeing a lot of Dragon Priest, a lot of Jade Druid, a lot of mid-range Jade Shaman. You can target your strategy against those decks instead of paying heed to the aggressive decks that you're seeing less of. Might give you an edge. Defender of Argus as well.
Wow, that's pretty good too. Wow, this game's
It's
spicing
still
up.
very close. And George Wash with more immediate resources, but Penn State has the gadgets in hand.
Yeah, the problem with the Argus here is how vulnerable it leaves them to just little tiny tempo plays. This could be disaster. Penn State's hand is just perfect for the following turn.
I wonder.
If they Argus up the Corruptor and attack, Swipe is killer.
And I don't think you can just Argus the Corruptor here. I don't think that's good enough.
It would have to be Argus and heal, and I think that's just too weak.
Oh my. This turn is insane for Penn State. It just doesn't get any better than this.
No, it doesn't. I mean, you can even Gadget, Innervate, Swipe, Jade Idol. You get a full clear. You get to keep your 4/4 Golem.
And your opponent needs to kill the Auctioneer.
I wonder.
That's a good turn if ever I've seen one.
I got the best deals anywhere.
They're considering shuffling the idol right now. This is their second idol, right? Yes.
Yes,
it
they
is.
played the first one on turn 1.
So they're going to shuffle this and then try to have the swipe and the innervate draw them into further idols. At this point, Jade Idol is a significant draw for them. They're picking up plenty of heavy cards.
Waits for no one.
All they need is to keep pressure high.
2 copies of
that's-
Druid of the Claw.
That'll help keep the pressure high. Boy, oh boy, now what? I think it's Rag and Pray.
You got a 1 and 3 to hit the gadget. Even if you don't hit the gadget,
They're-
maybe your opponent used all their spells last turn.
They are not getting better than 33% this game, I don't think. 33% sounds like a dream staring at this board with this hand. When your back's against the wall and you don't have good plays, you have to take the one that's the least bad.
This is it. Penn State used mulch early on.
Well, there's no punish here for Penn State until
there
now.
It is.
Now this is potential for a big punish. But Penn State's got to worry about Ragnaros too. I mean, they may need to respect that. With Jade Spirit and with Druid of the Claw, though,
Seems less likely.
I think they're moving in.
What to do?
I think they're considering shuffling more Jade Idols as well.
I mean, you could potentially just keep drawing them this turn.
Yeah, 5/5 it is. Oh my gosh. That slates the Aya. Draws another card. Hey, why not?
Oh my goodness.
Auctioneer is so good.
Time waits for no one.
This card is, oh my. Oh my. This is
Draw two
this
with
is
Wrath.
just not fair.
Sure.
That'll be Aya and push.
And this is where I'm coming from with my perspective on this matchup as a whole. A lot of people say Priest is slightly favored. You hear a lot of people saying that. Others will say, you know, it's 50-50. I've got to give the nod to the Druid. If they can make it past the first 4 turns against the Priest, it just seems like the Druid completely takes control of this matchup.
I mean, how much was influenced by the
By
turn?
that one turn.
Yeah. I think Penn State was likely to get into a similar state anyway. Auctioneer, I think, is really the bigger key card than really anything else. It's pretty reasonable to go even in the early state. It's being able to have big Auctioneer swings that makes the difference.
Just another reason why Priest needs Shadow Word 4. And this is just
It's 22 damage
16,
from
20.
hand for Penn State. Doesn't matter what it hits. And that's the worst one. Penn State, 3-1. Will move up to a 5-2 record and be going to the playoffs.
well played by Penn State. Unfortunate that George Wash had the one mishap in this game, but it's very likely that this game would have gone similarly to how it ended up anyway. And Penn State had a great series. 3-1. That's their 5th win.
Auctioneer's some payoff card.
Auctioneer can do crazy things. Even when you don't have Conceal, even when you're not playing Rogue, Druid can take great advantage of gadgets in Auctioneer.
I think I'd really like to see like a somewhat of a remake of that card, where it's more in the vein of if you play a spell that costs maybe 1 or less, you draw a card, and maybe his cost comes down a little bit.
Okay.
So cost and stats come down, so you can get it online sooner, but you can't be drawing cards off like Wild Growth or Wrath or.
In which
stuff
case,
like that.
Rogue could still use it
Maybe
with
exactly one, maybe exactly
Backstab,
0.
Cold Blood.
I don't know.
Druid could still use it with Jade Idol, Innervate.
Auctioneer to me, just when it gets going, it's like that's the end of the game. It takes a long time to set it up, but if it gets set up, it's like crushing to decks that are trying to play an attrition game plan.
And I mean, Conceal was moved into the Hall of Fame because Gadgetzin is so strong. Gadgetzin obviously is more versatile. You can play it in a wider variety of decks, but here we just saw it in Druid. And when you can cheat your mana curve and you have Innervate, which is still in the classic set, Innervate's not moving out.
Conceal's just strong in general. Like
Does some stupid things.
Conceal's the kind of card that can be prohibitive to card design as well. Say you have a card
True.
that like, at the end of your turn does something, it's really easy to kill. But if you conceal it and you get 2 effects of it, it's massively powerful. It's cool to have effects that do one thing once, die to what your opponent's doing, so it forces a turn from them, and then you try to use that benefit to your advantage. Conceal was
Scary.
It's like game ending a lot of times.
Makes
One mana
it
cards
limits
that
the designing
end
space.
games before they should end is okay. We had fun with them. Let's move on.
We had a good 3.5 years.
It's okay to
maybe
make
it's time to go.
It's
Maybe
totally okay to
eventually
make
you get a reprint that's something similar, but maybe different, like with Gadgets and Auctioneer, like you just mentioned. We've seen 2 Ragnaros, we've seen 2 Deathwing. The design team has certainly showed that they're willing to bring back cards, maybe change them up a little bit.
I like alternate versions of stuff. I think that's cool.
Alternate versions are very fun.
Like Ragnaros Light Lord's one of my favorite designs in the game. Just like an otherworldly take on Ragnaros. If everything else is bad and Ragnaros is good, what does he look like? Well, he heals Insect.
It's a fun card.
Perfect.
Makes everything a little bit more interesting. But we do have an interview ready with our winning team. It is Pennsylvania State University. Congratulations, guys. You just earned your 5th win, which means you are through to the regional playoffs. How does it feel?
It feels really good.
Yeah.
We're really excited. I mean, we were really hoping for this last week, of course, but got high rolled, so that was unfortunate. But we really want to say sorry about the disconnect. That was really unfortunate. Like it's not the ideal win we wanted to go out on, but it happens. So.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that it puts a damper on things, certainly, but you can't ignore how hard you guys have worked over the last 7 weeks, and you certainly have earned your place in the regional playoffs. So tell us a little bit of how you came together and how you formed your team for this tournament.
Yeah, so as like regional coordinator for all of Penn State UP, I coordinate all the teams that we have going on at UP, which is like 5 or 6, and then I was just looking through the teams that were submitted, and I saw one from Penn State that I didn't recognize, so I messaged him, and that was our 3rd that you see over here. I don't think you're able to hear him through our Discord, but I got in contact with him to bring as many people from other Penn State campuses, and I joined with him since I'm at Harrisburg now, and he's also at Harrisburg, and that's basically how we got our 3 here.
Well, no, we can't hear him, but we did certainly appreciate seeing his face nonetheless. It's great that even when you're not in the same place, you all 3 can come together. So that's fantastic. So we now know how you guys came together. Tell us a little bit, what's the esports atmosphere like at Penn State?
Honestly, so, I mean, do you want to talk from your points so far? Because I know a lot more. So.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, all right. So he's new to it because I just started esports club here at Harrisburg, but like at UP, at State College, we have tons and tons of people. We're really loud. We're really passionate about esports, and I mean, we're really big. We've been going on since like 5 years now, and once Hearthstone was in beta, we had a Hearthstone division, and I was a part of that. And it was a lot of fun. I didn't get into competitive until like the next semester, but like we grew from maybe like 10 people that were interested that were in the beta to like, you know, like 30 some that we have. And then not everyone plays competitively. We have a lot of fun with the LAN tournaments, and like people bring meme decks and still beat everyone that's competitive. And it's just a lot of fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I like loud and passionate things about esports. Anyone knows me, that sits right with me. Talk to me about your season so far. You guys have the playoffs ahead of you, but every single team seems to have different experiences. What's the 7 weeks been like for you guys?
God, I have done. So I'm a very like analytical person. So like what I've done for our team is I have spreadsheets. I have like we have graphs on like the odds of people bringing certain decks. We look at the patterns of what people have brought. Like this team, we saw they brought since the patch all control decks. So we had to bring 2 mid range. Just to make sure that and only 1 aggro, which we like running a lot of aggro, just because we didn't want to get cornered by the like straight control lineups that they ran. I mean, right after the nerf, at least I played like 20 hours of Hearthstone that weekend because it was our spring break, and I was just like miserable. But I had to learn the new meta. It was like I had to learn it, and like that's where we got the aggro rogue. At first, I was like, this is garbage, and like. But it ended up that aggro rogue's a thing now, and like it's the meta completely shifted, and like just those 20 hours and those 3 days that we needed to submit deck lists by Sunday was just crazy. So I mean, especially along that time period, and like how we've had the scheduled breakup half and half with different metas was really interesting, and hopefully that is not an experience we have to do again.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the most successful teams are the ones that were very flexible and responded well to the balance changes. So kudos to you for doing well with that. I do have to ask, is that a shirt on the iPad?
Yeah. Well, we wanted to make sure he was a part of us there, and really felt like he was enjoying himself. And he's got our really, really old Penn State esports shirt on. So.
Right on. I love it. All right. Is there anybody that maybe you guys want to give a shout out to? Any last words you'd like to say?
My mom.
I mean, I have a lot of like family members that really support me, but this one guy at my work, I want to shout out to him for this broadcast later. Mark, I will show this to him later because he doesn't believe in esports. He doesn't even think it's like I show him all these things all the time. He doesn't believe in it, but this will hopefully show them and make them believe in it. So that's what I got, and our Discord guy sadly can't speak, but that's all we got here. Yeah.
Shout out to his mom as well.
Oh yeah, shout out to Discord guys, mom. Well, hopefully we can make a believer out of Mark from work. I would like nothing more than that. Congratulations, guys. Best of luck moving on in this tournament, and you are officially in the regional playoffs. So I'm excited to see what you can bring to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hashtag Mark from work.
It's not Santa Claus, Mark. It's a real thing. It exists. Even Santa Claus to some degree is real because he's like an idea.
But like Mark is an actual.
Yeah, Mark is an
Mark.
actual person.
He's actually Mark
not
from
just,
work.
I don't think he's just an idea. Maybe he is. I'm not, not going to judge here, but I'm being a little hard on Mark, but it's real. It's here. It's what we're doing.
Mark's at work. Well, maybe not right now.
Yeah, maybe.
But
not.
eventually he will be. We have another tweet to bring up on stream. Let's see who this one comes to us from @Ben Hearthstone. In honor of National Pie Day, what is your favorite pie? You haven't eaten pie in a while.
I don't even really like pie that much, to be perfectly
Neither do
honest with
I.
you. Like, if carrot cake was a pie, I'd really like that.
Carrot cake's good.
But I don't know, pie, like a pie graph. This is really boring.
Like a pie chart?
3.14159. I kind of like when it stops at the 5.9. I like that pie.
I think there's a 2 after the 9, but that's about all I ever really.
There's infinite digits after the 9, but
I don't know. I'm not a pie person. National Nap Day was yesterday. I would have taken advantage of that.
I'm not a napper.
But
either.
I'm a napper.
No
Naps are
siestas
great.
for me.
I mean, I'm a recent college graduate, so that might have something to do with it. We were pro A+ nappers.
Yeah,
didn't
I'm
have a lot of time
busy,
for pie.
so I just don't sleep. I just plug right in and keep going.
That's the healthy way to do it. If you have any questions to ask us, tweet at Team Tespa. Go on Facebook /Team Tespa. If your question is chosen to be featured on stream, then you do receive the Dalaran Flame card back. Congratulations again to Pennsylvania State University. They have earned their 5th win in this Swiss bracket, and they are moving on to the regional playoffs. Very exciting for them.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and 9 teams competing in this event. We heard him kind of just keeping track of everything and making sure everything's organized. Sounds like the group over there is fantastic. That's the kind of stuff I like to see too, and where you'll start to see success is groups of people getting together and really focusing on how to improve.
People that take advantage of the self-ban and take advantage of the team format, I think statistically have been performing the best. So it's great to see that even if one team member can't be there, that they're still including him, putting a shirt over the iPad and really making sure that they communicate with each other. So Penn State, 3-1 over George Wash. Up next, we're going to have Colorado State taking on Miami, Ohio. We'll be right back with our next match of the day right after this.